Hey guys, I'm just gonna make a quick video today. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the GRE and my experience in studying for it so far. I haven't taken the official test yet, but so far I've gone through a couple practice tests, and I want to share with you guys just a couple tips that I've picked up so far that I think have just definitely helped me in my study. So when I first took my first practice test, I started with about a 314, which I think is a pretty solid score. I've studied for the last, I'd say, 2 months, and I've brought my score up to a 323. So I'm pretty happy about that. It's a solid 9-point jump. So I'm pretty hyped. But my point is, first of all, you want to be realistic about how much you can increase your score in some time frame. So if you're at maybe a 300 and you want a 330, you have to be somewhat realistic. You have to realize that you can't make major leaps in a super short amount of time. So you kind of want to plan accordingly. If you want to, say, increase your score by 30 points, you want to make sure that you're not scheduling your test, say, 2 months from, your first practice test. You want to give yourself enough time. You want to give yourself a realistic time frame, because as motivated as you might be in those moments when you're thinking yeah, you know what, I'm going to crush it, I can do this. When reality hits and you realize that it's sort of a large jump in scores that you kind of have to make up for, then you realize you need a bit more time to study for. So definitely, first of all, be realistic about your time frame. There's no shame in waiting a little bit and just taking it later, because we don't want you just constantly taking the test over and over again. It's expensive to take, so make sure you know how long realistically it will take to bring your score up, and then plan your GREs accordingly. Now, my second point is that you always want to kind of focus on the information you're not good with yet. So I've always been pretty good with the math sections. On the SAT, I was very good with math. English wasn't really my strong suit. For the GRE, I realized that if I wasn't too great with the reading comprehension yet, it would really be to my benefit to just dial in and focus on that section specifically. So I've been doing a little bit of math, but also I've just been focusing a lot on the reading comprehension, some of the vocab, and other more language related stuff. Because back when I was doing the SAT, I usually the topics I was not very good at, I didn't want to study because it was just less fun. It's more fun to study something when you're really good at it. But I made the mistake of not devoting enough attention to the things I wasn't great at yet. And that really hurt me when I was taking the SAT. For the GRE, if there's a section, whether it's verbal or math, for the most part, when there's a section that you don't want to work on, when you think to yourself, I really don't feel like working on this, unfortunately, that's usually what you should be focusing on if you really want to bring your score up. So always remember to focus on what you're not good at yet. There's no trophy for just going over problem after problem of, say, math if you're already really good at it. That's not going to increase your score. If you're already, in the upper echelons, if you're already doing very well in these sections, these tiny incremental differences, they're not going to have too much of an effect on your score. So once you've already, gotten good at one thing, once you've kind of already crossed that off, make sure you're also focusing on the things you're not good at yet. My next piece of advice is mostly for motivation. When you're studying a standardized test like the SAT, GRE, MCAT, or whatever else, for the most part, the information you're going to be studying is going to get really repetitive. Unlike classes where you're sort of always learning something new, the information's always changing. With the GRE or other standardized tests like the GRE, it's all very standard. You're sort of doing the same thing over and over and over again. You're always going to have the same sort of reading comprehension passages, the same sort of vocab questions, the same math questions. It can get very, very, very repetitive over time, which can lead to you just getting bored because you're doing the same thing for hours at a time. So my piece of advice that I think has helped me just maintain motivation is you always want to be thinking of some way that you can sort of switch things up or just keep things novel. And this can be, from a variety of ways. First of all, you could change up your environment. If you're studying in the same place day after day, if I'm studying, for example, in my room every day, I might get really bored of just studying in the same place. So I might think of changing things up. Maybe I go to a coffee shop. Maybe there's a Starbucks nearby, and that's more of a, study-ish environment that I can just use to change things up and kind of give my brain a couple hits of serotonin while I'm working, so I'm not just bored out of my mind. I could do that if I decide that maybe there's a friend I want to work with, so our study sessions are a little bit more enjoyable. And besides location, maybe you want to change up the music. Maybe you have some dedicated study playlists and you've listened to them day after day and you're getting bored. So that's another thing you can change. Change up the music a little bit. As long as you're changing things and adding some kind of new aspect to your study sessions. You want to keep things fresh, because if not, while studying a standardized test, you're going to get really, really bored. And now one mindset tip that I've been thinking about a bit is, and this might be sort of more personally geared towards me. Sometimes I'll be working on the GRE or maybe other standardized tests in the past, and I sort of had this thought creep in that, what if I put in all this work and it doesn't end up paying off? So what if I study hours and hours, and despite all the work I put in, I just don't get a very good score? And this is a major problem for just motivation, because if you want to lock in and just focus on this work, thoughts like this, when they're intruding into your mind, it can be very difficult to maintain motivation, because you just think to yourself, oh, like, will this extra hour really change anything? I might as well just not do it. But I just want you to think of the alternative. What are you going to do? Not study? If you don't study, if you don't put in that extra work, do you really think the result that you get is going to be anything comparable to what you get if you would have studied? Because if you feel like the hours you're putting in aren't going to pay off, I just want to ask you, if you think, imagine you did the best you could, you put in all these hours of work, and you finally take the GRE. And now compare that to a time that, let's say you maybe put in 20 hours less of work. So even if you put in all the work, you don't really get the grade you want on the GRE. No matter what, if you put in less time, you would have gotten that score, but even less. So even if you don't get, the perfect ideal score, you're still getting more than you would have if you did not study. And the thing is with the GRE, you can take it multiple times. You're not gonna be struck down by lightning if you don't do amazing on the first GRE. A lot of people have to take it multiple times. Same with the SAT. You don't have to get, a perfect 1600 the first time. You're allowed to take it slow and do it a couple times if you don't get the perfect result the first time. So what I'm saying is, if you study a ton, and you think, oh, you know what, it's not paying off, even if it doesn't really pay off the first time, it's okay, because you can take it again. And all those hours of studying, that will then help you in your subsequent tests. And now one last piece of advice that sort of ties into that same idea of just like motivating yourself is, it's really fun if you can find other people taking the same test as you and just form study groups and work with them. I know personally that as I've been studying for the GRE, I have a couple friends who are studying for the LSAT for law school. And I can say, just watching them study and just being around them while they study for that, it makes me so much more motivated to work on whatever I'm doing. Because if I'm the only one in my friend group just sitting around studying all day, everyone else is out doing fun stuff, I might just feel like really left out. But then if I have friends studying for the MCAT or the LSAT or even the GRE, and we're all sort of together, I see them studying and I realize, you know what, I'm not going to be the only one not to work. I'm not going to let them outwork me. So it's just really beneficial to have other people around you who are also working hard, and you can kind of look to them for motivation. I think that's super useful to just ace whatever standardized test you're going for. And now my final point for standardized tests is that when you get questions wrong in these tests, you should never be harsh on yourself or really self-critical. Because I definitely had this mindset when I was taking the SAT. I would get really pissed. Sometimes during the reading sections, I would get so mad, I would literally punch the book. I would get that mad sometimes when I did really bad on the SAT reading. That was back in high school, and I think I'm a little bit more calm and collected now. But one thing I've realized, it's so easy to just get really just harsh on yourself when you don't do as well as you wanted to on one of these standardized tests. But I think a good mind frame, a good mindset shift is to just think of every mistake as a learning opportunity. Because every time I mess up on a math problem on one of these tests, I always look at it and think, okay, like, this isn't great, I didn't do this right, but you know what, I'm never gonna mess up on this again, because I'm gonna remember how to do this right from now on. It's similar to stuff like organic chemistry. You have constant problem sets in that class, and you're constantly going through problems, getting a lot of them wrong, and you think, you know what, damn it, I got it wrong, but I'm never gonna forget that again, because like, once you've already looked at it, once you've sort of internalized it, same with reading comprehension, you look at a question and you think, I got this wrong. Don't just think, okay, I got it wrong, whatever, I'll move on. You have to look at questions and think, why did I get this wrong? What did I do differently than whatever the book recommends? How can I sort of change the way I think? And next time I see a similar question to this, how do I make it so I'll just know right from the get-go, okay, this is the right thing to do. Never get critical with yourself during a standardized test, because it's completely natural to get a lot of stuff wrong, especially at the beginning. You're going to get a ton of stuff wrong because you're just not used to it. They're new questions, things you haven't seen. So don't get mad at yourself. Use every mistake as a learning opportunity, even if there's a ton of them. If you have a ton of mistakes, that's completely fine. So do I. It's normal. So use them as a learning opportunity. I promise it's going to make you more motivated, and it's going to make your study sessions more enjoyable. Now, if you're still here, I really appreciate you watching until the end. If you like videos like this, you should subscribe, because there's going to be a whole lot more soon. But until then, I'll see you guys.